setup here.
Yep. Okay.
It's not working.
Norton,
Yeah.
the motorbike. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, welcome everybody to Dave Fidgeting on Talking Niagara.
Yes, welcome.
Welcome everybody. And we're gonna. It's like it's what, the 8th of April now.
8th of April.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
So welcome. And apparently we're expecting another snowstorm in days, or at least
It's April. It's April. Things like that happen in April.
Going to be hitting Toronto at least. Might be coming down here. I don't know.
Well,
yeah,
it's April. That's what happens in April.
Oh, I know. I'm just saying because I heard it on the. It's -4 right now, and there's potential for snow this morning. So there you go. Right?
Yeah, this is just so typical. That April is the month of frustration.
Yeah,
we get it into our head that March is the end of winter. It's never the end of winter.
Well, in fact, actually, it's weird. March was really full spring number 1, 2, and 3, wasn't it? Added together.
Yeah, you have everything in it. It's a mixed bag. It's so is April. So April is that month of frustration in Southern Ontario, where you get a couple of nice days, and then you get snow, and then you freak out. So everybody gets in there. The other day, I saw people with shorts and T-shirts on. Well, today they're not going to be wearing them, are they? The expectation, and then they're going to have to get their winter boots back out because it's going to snow. So this is April.
Well, yeah, and there are people out there that, of course, have taken their winter tires off already, haven't they?
Well, I've seen it snow on and not for very long, but on the May 24th weekend, I was fishing and it was snowing on the May 24th weekend.
But probably, you see, I saw it snow in June in the Alps, right? But
you're in the mountains, of course you're going to see it.
Well, actually, when I say in the Alps, in Munich, near the Alps, right? Not quite as high as the Alps, but basically, the year, of course, is the important factor. 1992, the year of Desert Storm, the year when Saddam Hussein set light to all those oil wells in Kuwait. Right, the year when black snow fell in the Alps. There's a layer of black snow for that year.
Wow.
Right. So it snowed about June 10th, but by lunchtime there was no snow to be seen anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, unusual. Well, every once in a while you get these unusual things, and it's unusual for it to snow in Munich in the coldest of times.
No, it's not. It's actually pretty normal. It's pretty normal for snow. It's about 50 miles from the Alps.
I've been in Munich a couple of times in the winter, and there was no sign of snow anywhere.
Yeah, well, no, I had more snow. It's a similar type of snow that you get here. Similar type of events to here. But anyway, if you're going in October for Oktoberfest, you don't get snow.
No, but I was there in midwinter, and it was I think it was January. There was no sign of January or February. Not a drop of snow anywhere.
It was weird because when I was there, it snowed. It pounded us by January, February, March.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
Yeah, but they, again, like Canada, they cleared the roads up very, very effectively.
Okay, then.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, so moving on. So be careful if you're going out there today. All right, everybody. Okay. So moving on. There's no endorsement coming from the mayors of Niagara's 3 largest cities for the prime ministerial race.
As it should be, I think.
Well, exactly. There should not have been, let's be honest, there should never have been any endorsement of Doug Ford, in that from them.
Yeah, they should stay out of it. Basically, there is this like the mayor of Niagara on the Lake, although it was pretty obvious that he was sort of a conservative, or at least it seemed to be in the interview. He refused to endorse any candidate because he felt that was not his purview.
Yeah,
I believe
exactly.
the other mayors think so too. Our own particular mayor thinks that if we have a member of parliament that's also a member of the ruling party, that's better for us. So that's why he was endorsing the conservative candidate during the Ontario election. But seriously, if everybody thought that way, then there'd be only one party in Ontario.
Yeah, yeah, and that's why we have democracy. That's why and it's like whether you like him or hate him. That's why we get somebody like Wayne Gates in our riding, right?
Yeah, and the whole idea, well, Wayne Gates is a good guy, but it would be better to have a conservative because they have a better voice at the table. That is
Well, they're
that is
allowed to think that.
questionable. Like if you have political scientists and that they question that very very strongly. Now, if you had a minister in your among those MPPs, then you might be able to get some more stuff for your community. But it doesn't always work that way.
No, in
And
fact, actually, it rarely works that way because often the ministers kind of, I can't vote on something that impacts my riding.
well, I'm not sure about that. They can. There's not.
They can, but
Of course,
they
they're going to
won't.
be able to vote on
As a
stuff.
minister, they stand off because they want other people to vote for it.
No, I don't think they stand off. I think if it benefits their community, they will. The thing they're going to be stuck with is you're going to have to go along the party line. So if there's legislation you don't think is going to help your city, but everybody else thinks it's good legislation, you have to fall in line.
That actually
That's
is
just
something.
typical politics, basically.
That's something I'm not happy with. I think that for logical reasons, if you have a reason to be opposed to a specific thing that your party is doing, you should be able to stand up and say no, not on this occasion. But
Well, yeah,
we
okay.
live with whip politics, and whip politics. It's one of the problems of whip politics, isn't it? Anyway, that aside, I didn't really expect any endorsement for Prime Minister because there's probably very little relationship between our mayors and Pierre Poilievre, for example, if one takes the logical extension that they supported Conservative last time.
They were very clear that they thought both both Carney and Poilievre are untested individuals, so they haven't had power, either one of them. Poilievre, of course, has been a career politician, so on that basis, you might want to just vote for him because he's more experienced politically. But on the other hand, Carney is super experienced in other factors, and so not necessarily a politician, but very capable of apparently of switching between careers easily. He's a very intelligent man. So the mayors have come out and said, well, we did not collectively endorse Ford government last time. Welland, St. Catharines, and Niagara Falls mayors all endorsed Ford, but they didn't do it collectively. They didn't get together as a cabal and say, let's unite and endorse Ford. They did it individually. But
I know.
they're not touching that. They're not touching that with a. It's too. Well, it's too divisive for one thing. And there's a lot of emotion. There's a lot more emotion in this election than there would have ever been in the Ford election. So they're just staying away from it, and and their reasoning, all three of them, is that the two, one of the two is going to be the prime minister. It's either going to be Carney or Polyev, and each one is untested and unknown to the mayors.
Yeah, fair. Okay, and it's also a level when you think about it. The mayors work with Queen's Park. They don't really. They're a level apart from Ottawa, right?
Yeah, you could make that argument that the mayors are going to be working with the provinces. The feds come into it once in a while with grants for housing or this or that.
Yeah,
but it's usually channeled through the province.
absolutely.
So definitely you to the mayors of the region here, they're most interested in what Ford can do for us. Basically, the Queens Park and the municipalities are the most important. Queens Park's the most important dynamic for the area mayors.
Well, in fact, any mayor would have to build relations with Queen's Park in order, it doesn't matter who's in the mayoral chair, they would have to build relations with Queen's Park. It's a must.
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah. All right. Moving on to another local story. Diodati wants Niagara Falls to be part of Ontario's big city mayors. I thought about this and I thought, is he nuts? Then I did a bit more research and I came across the Ontario Big City Mayors page, and it says Ontario Big City Mayors represents cities with populations of more than 100,000. I thought 100,000, that's not a big city.
Yeah. Paul and I mentioned it on his show yesterday too. Once you get over 100,000 residents in your city, you then become a potential qualifier for the Ontario Big City mayors. What is the advantage of that? That puts you in a collective of very powerful.
Well, it gives you.
Go ahead.
It gives you a wide range of updates, advocacy updates on housing, mental health, environment, climate, infrastructure, etc.
I think he's looking to be the 30th mayor. I think there's 29 or 30 mayors right now that are in the big city group on that webpage that you had mentioned. You can see them all there. I think there's about 30 of them, and he wants to be one of those. What advantage? And we have one. We have the city of St. Catharines already a member, I believe, because they're over 100,000.
Yeah.
So you can see that there are advantages to that, because now you're in a group of very powerful cities because of their residences. When you have the spokes, when you can collectively speak as the largest population centers in Ontario, it gives you an extra level of power, little extra level of influence in government. So is claimed by the website, but I don't have anything. I don't see any reason to doubt that, because when you get 30 mayors of the most populous groups, now I would say the problem with that is it focuses the government so much on those population areas. They're the ones they're going to have to satisfy, because those are where the votes are. But that excludes places like Northern Ontario and more isolated spots, because you're not going to get 100,000 people. I think in Thunder Bay and Sault Ste. Marie, I don't know those cities ever get over 100,000, or I don't know. You said very
possibly not. But I suppose what that gives them advantage about is, for example, updates, and I'm sure they could get them anyway. Updates, information about how information about these advocacy areas, which will be on their tabletop on a regular basis, about things like housing, mental health, addictions, environment and climate change, infrastructure, That's probably one of the most important things, and a whole basis of other reports that might well be available to such an organization.
I really don't know how it works. If they all get into a room and eat pizza and drink beer, I don't know. They'll probably get together. They'll probably have meetings. I'm not so sure if there's a membership fee, which I questioned yesterday on Paul's show. Will it cost the city any money to be part of this organization? Are there dues or anything else that we have to pay to be part of this organization? Which is unclear to me. How the organization?
Well, okay, so looking at the OBCM website, there's a section on here for careers. How would they get the money to? Okay. Not current hiring any positions at this time. Yeah.
Well, obviously, there's a bit of an organization there. They're going to have clerical staff and other things. However minor it is, will that cost us, the city? How much money it would cost us? I don't think it would cost much, if anything. Well, I imagine there's got to be some kind of dues or something that we have to contribute to keep that organization, together, because you need money for meeting rooms, you need money for communications, you need that kind of thing. But as long as it doesn't,
you probably have conferences and things like that, because basically a get together of 30 people plus an entourage around each of those 30 people, the staff that they might well bring, that takes a bit of organizing. So probably even if there's only one of those, one or two a year, it's still an impressive feat, and that takes organizing. Okay, the city's relevant. If you go to Toronto probably has facilities.
Well, probably doesn't. What does that mean? Probably.
Well, many cities have got facilities already. Don't necessarily need to go to big hotels.
I don't know. I don't know anything about how these people meet yet, and
I don't know either.
I hope that will be revealed in today's in today's meeting, our municipal meeting.
Yeah,
I think if the advantage is, obviously we need a seat at the table. We are a city of over 100,000 people. We are probably one of the most unique cities in the world, let alone just in Ontario. So we need a seat at the table. We have the population, and if the seat at the table has benefits for us, and obviously you can see all the different mayors who are part of this. Yeah, and they are the big city mayors, and obviously each one of those mayors thinks it's worthwhile being on this.
Yeah.
So I think we need a seat at the table, and we'll see what we can get out of it.
Yeah,
it could be important to Niagara Falls.
Yeah, and I'm not going to disagree on it, because I don't see any argument against that. We're now over 100,000. We're in that club. Maybe we have to wait a year or two before we're confirmed as being over 100,000. But I get it. I get why Diodati wants us to be a part of it. I think that's a worthwhile cause.
Well, yeah, I'm pretty sure once he gets in there, he'll be wearing lifts in his shoes to make him look bigger. I'm a big city mayor now.
I don't think he needs to. I don't think he needs to wear lifts in his shoes to make him look bigger.
Of course not. I'm being facetious.
Yeah, I know.
But
I know.
Obviously, like you can. There is no real ambition here with Diodati, other than the fact that we qualify. We should be there.
Yeah,
we should be there.
Qualified. We should be there now, is what he's saying. Yeah.
So yeah, you can't dump this on his ego. You can't dump this on anything else. We are over 100,000 people. We belong in that organization.
At first, I thought it was an ego thing, I have to say. And then when I first read the headline, as you gave it to me, I thought, yeah, ego. Then I looked into it and thought, oh, okay, there is such a thing.
Well, he gets a lot of ego boost anyway. He was just lately, was it Richard Branson came to town, didn't he?
The mayor always visits a lot of important guests. That's for sure.
Well, Bronson's one of the richest men in the world. He's the guy with Virgin Airways, I think it was, and he a self-made man, a Brit, I think he is.
Yep.
And
he
was here.
He's the person who, the album where the Beatles are crossing Abbey Road.
Yeah.
Right. Well, the phone box in that album is where Virgin Records started.
Ha! That's a nice little bit of trivia.
He took orders from that phone box, ran round to the record producer, the record company, and turn those orders around, and then posted those singles out.
Yeah.
Right. That's how Virgin Records started.
Yeah, and he didn't look too nervous there about. Anyway,
yeah.
I'd just like to mention that today I think the stock markets have quieted down. The Asian markets have quieted down. It looks like the other ones will quiet down now too. There's still a fair amount of uncertainty out there, but we may have reached the bottom now, and there's going to be some people looking for bargains, and they'll be buying back. This was what I expected to happen on Monday, but it didn't happen. I expected it also to happen on Friday. It didn't happen. I was waiting for the bargain hunters to buy in, but the nervousness was such that there was a 3-day collapse, but now it seems to be bouncing back up a bit. And just like we said yesterday, Netanyahu came to town and he said, oh, we're going to give 0 tariffs and eliminate all trade barriers. He bowed down to Trump to get rid of the 17% tariff that was put on Israel. We see a number of different countries coming forward, and the EU, which is a big bloc, has offered 0 tariffs both ways, and Trump hasn't accepted it. He said, you're going to have to do better than that. You're going to have to buy our energy and all that other stuff. So dropping the trade barriers between Europe and the United States wasn't enough for Trump. But the fact that Europe made that concession seems to have quieted things as well. We will see if the desired effect.
Well, remember the markets. Remember, you're only looking at the world markets, and they may have bounced up a bit, but we are still awaiting, of course, the opening of the North American markets.
I think because the Asian markets, who are even more jittery than the Western markets, have bounced up a little bit. I suggest that will be happening here, particularly when the very first visual effect of the tariffs, when Israel came hat in hand saying, oh, we're going to do what you ask us to do and more, and Europe is offering 0 tariffs. So there might be some calming of the waters right now. Whether or not Trump's mighty tariff war,
the interesting thing about
the results that he wants is still, the big one will be China. The big one will be China.
The interesting thing about this is that, of course, European Union being a tariff-free zone, they don't think in terms of tariffs.
Right? Well, they do think of tariffs outside. Like they don't have a whole lot of tariffs on American stuff, so that's not accurate. But what they do have is trade impediments. In other words, they're not bringing in a car because it doesn't have the right kind of rubber on the wheel, or it should have 5 studs
because it doesn't apply to European standards, is what you're meaning.
Yeah, and they'll put these standards on artificially.
But then the US has such standards as well.
What?
The US has such standards as well, you know.
But they don't. But the argument is that they don't put artificial standards and value-added taxes on them. So, say an American car goes to, and very few of them do, American car goes to Europe, and then it has a value-added tax put on it that the domestic cars don't have, which raises the price. It's not a tariff; it's a value-added tax. There's all kinds of these sneaky little.
Yeah, but you see again, like most European cars that are sold in America and made in America, most American cars that are sold in Europe are made in Europe.
Oh, that's what Trump doesn't tell you. There's all kinds of Fords and stuff like that in Europe.
Yeah. Because
American car companies are building cars in Europe.
Yeah.
But not too many European car companies are built. Well, maybe
they are.
But the point, his point anyway, is that they are more than just tariffs that restrict the trade going in. Like for instance, I'll give you an example here. It would be in Canada. We would not be able to import certain agricultural products into Canada because they use growth hormones in their beef, and that if they grew the beef specific for the Canadian market, that would be fine, and where they didn't use those growth hormones. So that would be a restriction on the trade between the two of us. Now, if you start putting restrictions on the trade that are kind of superfluous, they didn't eat green enough grass. The cows didn't eat green enough grass. That's why we can't bring them in. That kind of thing. So there's all kinds of these little tricky add-ons that restrict the trade.
I think that growth hormones. I see what you're going, because the argument about growth hormones, that's a rule that I think we as Canadians can actually say, yep, we're opposed to growth hormones. And let's not get into the political argument that brings up. But it would be our right to say, hey, we as Canadians are opposed to growth hormones.
Well, see, then the Americans will go and say, okay, you're not taking our chicken wings. You're not taking our chicken wings. So that's and you're artificially putting on the hormone thing to resist. And it's up to us to argue, no. If you want to grow chickens for our market, you can't use growth hormones. We'll accept it, So these are the kind of things that have to be laid out.
Yeah,
like Fruit Loops. Fruit Loops in the United States use all kinds of chemicals and for their coloring, and in Canada, you're not allowed to use those.
Yeah.
So what about the Fruit Loop kind of tariffs that are going to go on?
Well, and again, you easily get around those by the fact that you have local manufacturing, don't you?
Well, that's the whole point. If they're making Fruit Loops and if they want to make them for the Canadian market, they're going to have to reduce the colors that in them, which we feel are dangerous to our consumers.
Yeah,
that's the same. A lot of those things are in Europe too. They have a lot more environmental protections and health protections on their foods and other things. Right. So those things would have to be sorted out in any kind of trade deal too.
Yeah. Okay, let's move back into our stories that we've got. IDF soldiers share how they expanded the Gaza buffer zone. Basically, there's a group now which is called Breaking the Silence, which has been out there since about 2000, who's an Israeli-based NGO made up of former members of Israeli Defense Force, so veterans of the IDF. And they're reporting, they released a report entitled Soldiers' Testimonies from the Gaza Buffer Zone, which contains information and interviews with dozens of soldiers about how they've expanded the buffer zone across into Gaza.
Yes, so the buffer zone it could be as much as 1.5 kilometers. The buffer zone that the Israelis are creating in Gaza will take up nearly 1/5 of the land. And in that area where lots of people lived, and it was some of the most most of the agricultural land in Gaza, it appears. They're just tearing things apart in there. They're destroying everything. And one of the IDF soldiers described it as Hiroshima. They just go in and blow things up. So these soldiers were trained to blow up military sites and tunnels and that kind of thing. And they were given instead the job of destroying people's houses and any kind of infrastructure, and just laying waste to a land, and just pushing people out. Right now, these are testimonies from the IDF about the outrages they were ordered to do. They are brave enough to have come forward, and they have been.
But they are remaining.
These soldiers have been testifying for what they've done in East Jerusalem, on the West Bank, and in Gaza.
But remember,
it was founded in 2004.
Yeah, and they're not testifying here. Remember, they're not testifying here. It goes back to 2004, yes, but they're not testifying here about specifics. They're not giving their names either. So their identities remain sealed.
Yeah, I suppose. Well, it's anyway. Eyewitness accounts of what they did and what kind of outrages they committed in the area. And
by the way, it's not just Gaza, because it includes the West Bank, it includes East Jerusalem, and somewhere else.
In this particular article, it's talking about Gaza, though.
Yeah, they are.
And so the Gaza-Israeli border killed over. Well, after that raid by Hamas, that first outrage that spurred all the other outrages, that gave the Israelis the excuses they need to crush the Gazans. Well, basically, it tells you in this article, it gives you very good, clear intent that the Israelis hope to push the people right out of the area. And if they can't do that, they'll push them into smaller and smaller areas. They intend to make their life so miserable that they will have no choice but to leave. That is yet to be seen. However, the Palestinians, as we've seen throughout time, have been extremely resilient and capable of withstanding outrage after outrage. Unfortunately, they fight back with violence in a way that sometimes they like the October 7th thing, which precipitated all of this and was poorly thought out. It gave the idiots didn't realize it would give the Israelis the excuse they need to do what they want to do, and that is just to expunge Gaza of every Palestinian. And then they got this goofball Trump who wants to make some kind of resort in Gaza. And he says he doesn't care who lives there, but in the meantime, all the Gaza's got to go so he can build his resort. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. But the clear intent of the Israelis is to get them out of there, push them out of Gaza. And unfortunately, Hamas gave them the excuse to do that.
Yeah, and they're equating what is going on in Gaza to going to Hiroshima in the days after World War II was over. Yeah,
the intent is clear: destroy everything. Most of the hospitals, all the universities, the schools, the infrastructure. This particular zone, basically, this buffer zone that they're making, incorporates a lot of the areas where they have water and food and that kind of thing going on, and agricultural land. So they make it impossible for the Palestinians to live there, and which is their intent, basically.
And what they're basically saying is that once they expand the buffer zone and that expansion is complete, it'll encompass as much as 17% of the Gaza Strip area.
Yeah, they're pushing the people into smaller and smaller zones, and of course, right now the Israelis have gone back into Gaza, and they are occupying 50% of all Gaza right now,
Well,
committing one outrage after another, killing people, killing medics, as we saw, and then lying about it and making excuses about it. And they don't care. They don't care. They got Trump the chump that's in their back pocket, so they don't care. And
well, the interesting thing is about this. There's a map here of Gaza, right? And the map includes big red blocks for the numbers of buildings who are likely destroyed since October 12th, 2023. Of course, it looks, according to this map, as if Gaza City has been obliterated. Khan Yunis, again, not quite as badly obliterated as Gaza, but still pretty bad. And Rafah on the Egyptian border also pretty much obliterated.
yeah, it says here before October 7th, that was Hamas's dumbass raid and murderous raid that gave the Israelis this excuse. There were about 180,000 buildings in Gaza based on United Nations estimation. He says 120,000 of those buildings were destroyed before the ceasefire was broken in March. Data detailing destruction since. So basically, my hat's off to the Israelis, the soldiers that have come forward who don't like what they're being doing. There are thousands of them, 14 or 15,000, I think. I don't know. I can't remember how many soldiers have come forward and given their accounts of what they did and what the rest of the IDF did over time. Like I said, it started in 2004. This operation, and I'm looking at that map now. So my big hat's off to those soldiers that have come forward that are very, very uncomfortable with what they have done. So breaking the silence. Thank you very much. Breaking the silence, Israeli-based NGO, for coming forward. My hat's off to you.
Yeah, we need more of that, right? We definitely need more of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this can't continue. The whole idea, but the intent is very clear: a greater Israel, the Zionist movement, and particularly the most right wing of the Zionist movement. Why Zionists are right wing anyway, but the Zionist factions want all Christians and all Muslims out of Jerusalem. They want all Christians and Muslims out of the West Bank and Gaza. It's not really conducive to peace or long-term security. We'll see.
Well, an interesting thing here is Professor Adi Ben Nun, the Geography Information System Department at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, has been tracking the destruction in Gaza and the expansion of the perimeter since the war. And this is saying there were about 180,000. Now there's only 120. 120 of those 1,000 buildings were destroyed. Right.
I don't see, the world seems to be so wimpy and doing the three monkey thing: see nothing, hear nothing, or if they do see something or hear something, they quickly forget it or track away from it.
Yeah, and what they
don't really see much. I don't really see much that of the world coming to the Palestinians' aid, except for money and food and things like this. Nobody has the guts to face up to Israel, because Israel has a powerful lobby in Washington. The Israeli lobby is extremely powerful, and you won't find any politician talking about the Israeli lobby at all. They quickly throw their coats over their heads and run away.
But what this individual can do is he can trace the maps as they were before with deadly accuracy, of course, because they're satellite maps, and we can trace as they were and as they are.
Yeah, the evidence is there.
Yeah,
it's up to the world to do something about it. European Union, they're weak and wimpy. Trump is weak and wimpy. He needs the Israeli lobby big time. So I don't see anything changing anytime soon.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. Yeah, but needs to. All right. Anything else on? I haven't got any comments upon that one, but anything else there or not?
Well, it's going to be hard for people to think of this because we get the one-sided story all the time from
Yeah.
both sides of the left and the right media over here because they're all afraid of the Israeli lobby in a number of ways. They've been bit by that lobby anytime they get too close to the truth over there. So they just kind of pretend it's not happening, you know.
Yeah. And, actually, the interesting thing is that with the stance we've been making about this since the beginning of that war, there's a Jewish lady that I know that I was speaking to the other week, and we got into the subject of the Gaza war, and I expected her to be very critical of my thoughts, but she wasn't.
I like to remind you that there's a bunch of Jewish students at Columbia right now, Columbia University, that they took that fellow Mahmoud, I forget his whole name anyway. The U.S. grabbed one of the students out of Columbia and put him in jail in Texas, and are holding him there. They're going to try to deport him because they say he was an anti-Semitic protester. Well, you have a whole lot of Jewish students in Columbia chaining themselves to the fence in protest of that. They knew the guy. They were with him in his protest. They were with him the whole way. This is the real story. This is the real story you don't often get out of that. You see this guy, he's being taken away, called an anti-Semite, called a terrible guy. He's he should be thrown out, his student visa and all that. And yet you have Jewish students who he was protesting with, chaining themselves to the fence to make it very clear that this guy was a fellow looking for peace. And he was not anti-Semitic, obviously not, if he's demonstrating with Jewish protesters and they're on his side.
Yeah.
How anti-Semitic can that
be? Well, we had this whole discussion about anti-Semitism and the inclusion of being anti-Israeli.
Yeah, so my hat's off in a big way to those Jewish students. And you know what? You have to look for it to find it. You won't find that too often on the headline news where you don't. You have to look for it. And there they were. There were all these Jewish students chaining themselves to the fence as part of a demonstration demanding the freedom of this fellow that has been incarcerated. And it's I don't know. It was very heartwarming for me.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. So there's another horrific story here that I found yesterday. For every child who stayed in a domestic violence shelter in Alberta last year, 4 more needed shelter but couldn't access it.
Yes.
I got to thinking about this, and it's like, yes, it's headlined because it was on the Edmonton Journal, and that's where I came across it by accident. And I'm thinking to myself, the whole of this is absolutely disgusting. Of course it is. But how much exists not just in Alberta, but in other parts of Canada as well?
Well, Alberta is, I think, probably our richest per capita province right now.
Yeah.
Alberta really is carrying the water for the rest of Canada a lot of times in its transfer payments. It's wanted to get out of CPP, was it? That kind of thing, wants to run it itself. Feels like it's paying too much for other people. Or the pension, or the Canadian Pension Fund. So Alberta is a very wealthy province right now, and to see something like this from a very wealthy, well-to-do province in Canada. It's hard enough to see it anywhere in Canada, but in a wealthy province like Alberta, to see that they are under capacity for children who are um, vulnerable to violence. The children have to be turned away, up to 40%
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
those turned away from shelters that are supposed to protect them from violence, because Alberta is so undercapacitated, has so are such low capacity levels. They are, like it says here, like 32 2023 to 24 shelter impact report paints a sobering picture of a system pushed beyond its limits, with 32,000 people, including thousands of children, unable to access shelter space due to lack of capacity. This is the highest number ever reported in Alberta, says Kat Champagne, executive director of ACWS.
That's Alberta Council of Women Shelters.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And
now there comes this a crisis, and if those numbers are even half what they say they are, it is a crisis.
Yeah, it is. And the thing is that what I think we've had here is is expansion of the number of people going to Alberta, but not the expansion of facilities in Alberta, the infrastructure, the shelters, and the like.
Yeah, it says here, though, while Alberta's population increased by 18% over the past year, shelters admitted 22% fewer survivors per capita, and the number of people turned away rose by 19% per capita. Yeah. So we have a rising population and a reduced capacity in shelters. This is something that really has to be. I know this is one of those embarrassing things that they show up, whereas the government and people aren't paying enough attention to those people who are talking to them. Then they finally go to the press and they're humiliated.
Yeah.
Just like the Alberta healthcare system has been humiliated of late, like we reported last week.
Yeah, and just to be clear, we're not picking on Alberta. They just happen to be suffering growth pains that I think of concern to many Canadians.
Well, it was an Alberta article about Alberta.
Yeah, I know.
So it's not.
No, I'm saying you and I are not picking upon Alberta. We're not just focusing on Alberta for the sake of it. We're just saying that, Alberta's suffering these massive growth pains.
Well, I'm not picking on Alberta. I don't know about you.
All right. No, I'm not picking on Alberta either. I'm just highlighting things like this, because when we do have this, especially in a province that is supposedly doing well, it
is doing well.
Concerning, yeah. Oh, it is doing well, yeah. Undoubtedly. Sorry,
we'll do better.
Yeah.
Yes, if you're looking at it, doesn't matter what party you're listening to, Alberta's going to do much better coming up, because Alberta oil is going to flow more and all that, because nobody is going to resist that now with after the Trump machinations to take us over. Nobody's going to resist oil pipelines anymore, whether they're conservative or liberal. The liberals have changed. Basically, they've become more conservative and in their thing. So Alberta's futures will probably be very rosy going forward. The energy in which they export will be exported more across Canada than before. So I think no matter how the election turns out, Alberta will do better. However, Alberta says that they will go more towards cessationist if the Liberals win another election. But I think they're going to be happy with Carney if he gets in, because he knows that if he tries to lord it over Alberta, that's a bad thing.
Yeah. I don't know. Well, yeah, and we shall see anyway in all of that. right. And basically, I think people who have gone through this system, of course, say that there needs to be more support.
Yes, indeed. Um, I think you'll probably find the same problem here. We found the Birch Society, or whatever they call it now,
That's
which
right.
used to be Birch Way, which used to be the woman's place. Uh, they're always asking for money all the time. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
we had them come to our club and ask for extraordinary amounts of money, and we couldn't even come close to it. So
Yeah.
we exclude them now because they get a lot of funding from a lot of different areas, and we find other places that don't get the funding. So that's where we're trying to focus our efforts.
Yeah.
So yeah, so they get a lot of funding, but still, even despite all the government funding and the NGO funding, nonprofit, uh, government, non-government organizations that put a lot of money into Birchway, they themselves are still under capacity.
Yeah.
Uh,
So it's not just an Alberta problem. It's it's an Ontario problem as well.
yeah, unfortunately, it's hard to break the cycle of abuse,
Yeah.
and it's a very very tough thing. People who come from abusive backgrounds tend to be abusers when they become adults. So those children that are abused now will grow up to be abusers
Yeah.
because that's what they've known.
Yeah. Oh
I
yeah.
remember talking to one of my neighbors. She got into an abusive relationship and just felt that that's the way it was because in she grew up in an abusive relationship, and then she married into an abusive relationship, and she said to me that once her relationship was over and met the next guy, and he wasn't an abuser and he was an ordinary guy, and she couldn't believe the situation which she was in. She just did not believe such things
Well,
really
actually,
existed.
actually, I spoke about a dozen years ago. I spoke with a doctor, a psychologist, who basically deals with that kind of abuse, and he was telling me a lot about the causes for the abuse and how particularly battered women tend to want to be in relationships. They tend to go back into new relationships as battered women. So there's a continuing cycle of abuse there.
Yeah, it's like people trying to quit smoking. Basically, they go back to something they're familiar with
Yeah.
all the time,
Yeah.
and they feel almost uncomfortable being in a normal relationship. This
Yeah.
lady that I'm talking about, my old neighbor, um, now the guy was every bit a macho guy that any other guy is. He had a truck. He did work like that. He was football, all kinds of other type of guy. He was as macho as you could get, but he wasn't going to lay a finger on his woman. He wasn't going to abuse her one bit. That's what she was so surprised about
Yeah.
when she did through the few relationships she did have, she chanced upon this fella who she liked and expected the same kind of treatment and didn't get it, and described that to me, and how revealing it was to her that she didn't have to go through that, and how blessed she felt. Imagine a woman feeling blessed just because her husband doesn't kick her around or abuse her
Yeah.
and
Oh, yeah.
sees her more as a partner than
Yeah.
as an underling.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. All right. We got a science piece here. They discovered 7,000-year-old mummies in the desert. All right.
Oh, I
Um,
love this. I love that when you put this one
and,
up.
and
Oh, this
they
is fun.
and the interesting thing is that they didn't show the expected sub-Saharan genes. They come from a different the DNA shows they come from a different source.
Yeah, these are 7,000-year-old mummies, and they come from the Sahara Desert. And you say, well, how could people live there? 7,000 years ago, uh, parts of the Sahara were a plush grassland.
Yeah.
And I'll remind everybody here that knows anything about Roman history North Africa was one of the richest parts of the Roman Empire.
Yeah.
It was the breadbasket of the Roman Empire. So the northern strip
Well,
of
in fact, actually, like Egypt was the breadbasket of the Persian Empire, as well as being the breadbasket of the Greek Empire as well.
well, that's because they have a river going through it. But at that time, the whole that whole northern coast of Africa was a rich agricultural area. Wheat and
Yeah.
other grains were grown there in abundance. You won't find that. Trust me, you will find very little of that now. Having traveled to Libya and Morocco in my life, and knowing that there's not much that can go on there in the way of grain cultivation anymore. And that's because of the desertification of northern Africa. But 7,000 years ago, it was the environment was much different. They had more water, the more things were growing there, and they found this group of people, mummies of a group of people in southwest Libya, and they call them the Takara Kori rock people, because they found them in the Takara Kori rock shelter and they found that the DNA of these mummies were very unique.
Yeah. Yeah, they expected them to be sub-Saharan, but they were not.
No, they weren't. They, which was very much a surprise for them. They felt that the other groups that had migrated into the area showed a lot of sub-Saharan DNA. These people were more related to a group that was around in Morocco about 15,000 years ago. But the Moroccan population, even though there is strong correlation between the two groups, the Moroccan group had much more Neanderthal DNA in it than these people did. But these people had 10 times less of the Neanderthal DNA in it. But the fact that it was even there was surprising to the researchers. The difficulties that these people have is when they do find people in the desert, DNA does not survive well in desert and arid conditions. So it's very, very difficult for them to find stuff. But they found enough markers to suggest that this was a unique and isolated group for a long time. And because of the different kind of and they had remained isolated for a time. But what was in their DNA was surprising. They had even little bits of that from the Levant, and they had much less sub-Saharan DNA, which they expected to see, so which told them that there was less diversification of and mixes of population, which they had expected to see.
Well, and actually, the interesting thing is, you'd think about those that are in northern Africa to have had much more interaction with Europeans, wouldn't you?
No, they would have had more interaction with the sub-Saharan. That's why, or that's what is expected. The Europeans are all the way across the sea. The sub-Saharan was not that much sub-Saharan back then. Remember, it was grasslands all the way to the more lusher forests of Africa. So the ability of people to move across those areas was not inhibited by desert back in those days.
Yeah.
So that's where they expected more sub-Saharan admixture. Now, the fact that these people are 7,000 years old and they seem to have been an isolate population for a time at least, the ingredients that made them up before they became an isolate population is what's very curious to the archaeoanthropologists.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of the thing that kind of drew my attention to this. And not the irony here is the headline was actually, what, are you serious? Right.
Yeah. Now they found a couple of females, I think, and they expected they were herders. So this is in a pastoral time when you could move your herds around because there was enough grass and water to do that.
Well, in fact,
nothing lives in Southwest Africa now. Or Southwest Libya. Let me tell you, it is nothing but barren sand.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, if you look at places like Tunisia, you were talking about growth, about everything. Tunisia is full of olive plantations, and these olive plantations are 2,000-3,000 years old.
Oh yeah, the ones that the settlers are chopping down in Palestine go back thousands of years too.
Yeah,
Um, the the well, olives were one of the mainstays of ancient ancient
ancient Rome,
commerce.
ancient Greece, Carthage,
Yeah,
and
and
all of
not
those.
only they were edible, of course, they were a good source of food, but they also provided oil. And it was
Yeah,
used in all kinds of things.
yeah,
Um, the oil was used in lamps. Olive oil lamps are all over the place. It
yeah.
was so
Oh
much
yeah,
abundance that those were the lamps that people used at nighttime to see,
yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
fueled
You know,
by olive oil.
and that's what I think is a bit of a shame about what they're doing um in
West Bank.
West Bank. Yeah, couldn't think where the hell it was. Yeah, such a shame that they're clearing these things because they're thousands of years old.
Yeah, it's remarkable.
Yeah,
But the fact and we were just talking about DNA. The DNA of the Palestinians are and the Israelis and the other the Misrata Jews and other things. The Palestinian DNA is more closely related to the ancient Jewish DNA, so I'm told, and I even read someplace where uh, DNA was even illegal in Israel because it showed that the Palestinians, were there for 15,000 years, and they matched those that of the Jewish ones, and it was very obvious that many Jews converted to Islam back in the time, and those people who are now
no,
Muslim.
not
Uh,
not unexpected, realistically, Dave.
no,
The
but
world went through a major change
my
at that
point is,
time.
yeah. Well, my point is, um, Jewish people come back to their homeland, but what they're doing is they're meeting their old relatives that have converted to Islam, but they don't want to know that.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing. I'd love to see more about that. That's for sure. Because I'm sure that's correct.
You'll never hear it in the U.S.
Yeah.
news. You have to go to scientific papers and stuff
Oh
like
yeah.
that.
Yeah. All right, and I think we've come to the end of where we are today.
Yes, indeed. And without further ado, I bid you adieu, pray for peace, and don't forget Gaza.